Thank you for having me, and thank you to all of our panelists, to everyone watching today. This will be a really valuable and meaty 40 minutes. I want to start by pointing out a couple things before we get to introducing our panelists. The first is that just how much company meaning matters to employees. So according to a McKinsey report, is from the spring of 2021, almost 50% of workers said that COVID had them thinking about more deeply about their jobs, and what they were looking for is meaning. 70% said that their sense of purpose comes from their work. On top of that, more recently, according to the 2022-2023 Mercer Global Talent Trends report, 96% of workers globally expect their company to pursue a sustainability agenda. 96%. So employers who can tie the experience of working at their company to the social and environmental good will definitely have the advantage when it comes to attracting new hires. And that's what our panelists will, of course, be talking about today. So I'd like to begin by having our panelists introduce themselves, very briefly, tell us who you are, where you work, and give us a sentence about what you do there. We'll start with Jennifer at Iron Mountain.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Cartono. I'm at Iron Mountain, and I'm the head of organizational strategy and development of people.
Thanks, Jennifer. Judith.
Pleasure to see everyone. Judith Almendra. I work at TTEC, we're a customer experience organization, and I have responsibility for human capital and talent acquisition for the business globally.
Jason.
Hello, everyone. Jason Serrato. I'm a senior director on the product team at Eightfold AI. We are an HR technology company helping people find the right career for everyone in the world.
Laura.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Donahue. I lead corporate social responsibility at CarMax, as well as our ESG practice. And within my team, I have diversity and inclusion, our corporate foundation and community relations, and a couple of other functions.
Thanks. And last but not least, Megan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Trotter. I'm at Zendesk, and I lead our social impact and sustainability efforts, and also a lot of the ESG components as well.
Thank you guys so much. All right, let's get to it. Laura, I want to start with you because I know that you have been working on a project over the last couple of years. Specifically, you started a CSR program from scratch. So let's start at the beginning. Why did you decide to start CSR at CarMax? And give us a little bit about what it took to get going.
Sure. So CarMax, from our founding, was founded on a basis of bringing integrity to the used car business. And so we had it kind of in our DNA that this was how we went to market, this is how we operated, but we didn't have any organized strategy around both having a positive social impact and contributing to long-term sustainable growth. So as the company matured, we had a number of different areas of the organization that were doing a lot of this great work, whether it was our energy team on EH&S, our community relations team, foundation, diversity and inclusion, but those work streams weren't aligned around a set of cohesive strategies. And so we weren't really building strength of either narrative or impact based on the fact that we had a lot of good work being done, but it wasn't aligned and it wasn't coordinated. So the senior leadership of the organization felt that we needed to have a dedicated corporate social responsibility team that could organize those work streams and could align them around a smaller and more cohesive set of strategies. So that's where I came in, having been on the marketing side for about 30 years with CarMax. I then put on an incredibly different hat and started CSR just about 2 years ago, a little under. And where we started was working with the team that we decided would be a part of the CSR organization and aligning on that purpose of having the dual impact of positive social impact and sustainable growth. But also determining through an engagement with an outside consulting agency, really what was material to CarMax, both from all of our stakeholders. Where did we want to lead our industry and continue to differentiate ourselves from our competitors? What was going to be super meaningful to our associates, and where did we think we could continue to grow? So that helped us align around 3 different focus areas. It helped us align on sort of our foundational ways that we were going to deliver that work, and then communicate that out to the organization so we could build some enthusiasm and awareness for it.
I mean, your background in marketing certainly put to good use here as well.
That's right. That's right.
Not that much of a leap, right? You're going to have to use those skills every day.
That's right. It's all about the brand. It's just the
Mhm.
consumer facing one or the world facing one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know other panelists when like Laura was talking about, sort of how you assembled the team that would work on it, and then identifying what would be your focus areas. Would anybody else share how they got there? Judith, if you want to jump in here.
Sure, absolutely. I think from our perspective, right, it's very important to identify what are the strengths, like you just mentioned, right, Laura's marketing side, and it brings obviously some great value to those conversations. So I think it's just identifying people with different strengths, but most importantly for us was key to make sure that everybody that is engaged in those teams are very passionate about it, because in some cases it's not necessarily wasn't, at least for us, a full-time job. And it was something that we needed to do in addition to all the other responsibilities that you had. We had some resources that were dedicated, but for the most part, it takes a village to make a real transformation happen. So for us, it was, looking for people that were passionate about it, and there were different ways in which we gathered that information from leaders actually volunteering or just recommending some resources, and others actually raising their hands to make sure that they had, again, the passion and commitment that we needed in order to make that happen. So that's the approach that we normally took.
Well, you brought up there that it's, for a lot of companies, employer branding is not a full-time job for any one person at the moment.
Mhm.
Large companies who have been doing this longer, they often will have a person whose responsibility this is. Large companies have full teams, but that's still
Mhm.
very rare. Every employer has an employer brand. It's whether or not you're actually putting people and resources toward managing it, and companies are still figuring out how to do that. Jason, I'd like to know, at Eightfold, how are you thinking about guiding the brand, and who works on that?
It's a great question. I think it's a team effort, as was just mentioned, between marketing and HR, and even our product strategy and our leadership team. I've been working for much larger companies over the course of my career. Eightfold, we've been around for about 6 years now, but still relatively in the startup phase. So we have a little bit more agility, but it's also a little bit more all hands on deck. With the size of our company. One of the things that we do as a company is we talk about how, we embed AI in our talent intelligence platform, and we have this phrase, AI for good. And we've started this concept of, we try to use AI for good, let's leverage Eightfold for good. And we've started these efforts around Eightfold Gives Back, and we have an executive leadership team we called our Eightfold Compassion Committee, which is cross-functional and it includes HR and finance and marketing and communications. And part of what we're also trying to do is take some of the expertise that we have in-house and figure out how we can provide that to some of the communities where we work and serve and live. So, for example, some of the things we do is, we tend to have a lot of people that have a strong expertise in HR and talent and recruiting and career development. Well, we do career development events in our local communities. So I think, there's some things around, definitely a cross-functional team, definitely a team sport, but also I liked some of the comments of the other panelists around aligning these efforts for greater synergy with ultimately the mission and the value of the company.
One advantage that I think Laura may be the only one on the panel, has this advantage of having an employer who's a household name, right? Most people know who CarMax is, but Zendesk and Iron Mountain, Eightfold, and T-Tech, you guys make other businesses possible, right? You're the B2B side. And you guys have a harder time when you don't have an immediately recognizable name that a potential hire is going to think, CarMax, I had a great experience there, what have you. Megan, Zendesk, I think lots of people probably actually used your product, but don't realize it. So can you talk about how you think about presenting your corporate purpose when marketing your company as a potential employer, or even reinforcing that to your current employees?
Yeah, great question and great kind of challenge. You know, how do you get across the noise? And I think Jason, you know, your point on kind of finding what makes sense for your company is exactly right. Like, you can't be, if you're not a household name, you can't be, you know, latching on to kind of any cause that comes around. I think there's a bit of, you know, when you're taking stake of all of the people that are in the room and all of the expertise, there's also taking stake of what you do as a company and where you can uniquely show up. So for Zendesk, we're a customer service software company, and that's where we can really make a difference, right? We can do that through giving our products to nonprofits and enabling them to do really innovative, cool things within our products, or we can train underrepresented groups in our technology to kind of move folks from traditional customer service jobs to lifelong careers in customer experience. But I think, you know, kind of really understanding where is your unique swim lane and really sticking to that and having that consistent message of, you know, we are about great customer experience, whether that's in our products, whether that's in how we show up for impact, whether it's in all of these things, and just staying really, really consistent in that messaging.
Judith, what about you? I know T-Tech, you do similar work.
Yes, very similar. And I think, and I couldn't agree more with what Megan was saying. I think it's important to define what are the areas that you're going to be focusing on. For us, a lot of our work is around education and supporting the communities where we are operating, and supporting those communities with underserved groups that don't have access to the education that they need, children for the most part. But also, you know, our company was founded over 40 years ago with the premise that we could deliver a better customer service, a better customer experience. So sometimes communicating that to the market when you are a B2B, it can be a little bit challenging. So for us, it always starts with making sure that people understand what's the what of the job that they're going to do and the why behind it. So when you have the what and the why clearly defined, whether it's in your marketing materials, in your website, in the stories that you are telling to the market, is kind of like how you start getting interest from candidates that otherwise may not consider you. As you mentioned, Emily, so important in today's world. Your social presence is very important to make sure that you are telling that story, and it's not just us telling that story, it's our employees telling that story. Today's environment, brands are created by our people, not by the marketing department anymore, right? So it's very important to make sure that our people are telling the stories. We just took 100 of our best employees to Disney World last week, and we call them magic makers. And it's about those magic makers taking that power and that excitement and those contributions that are making to the organization and infusing that through the business and telling that story to the market. That helps us. We get over 2 million people applying to T-Tech on an annual basis. And that is thanks to a lot of the efforts that, again, is the power of our people that makes it happen.
Judith, with you and Megan talked about picking what you're going to focus on and what you're good at, and focusing on that. Lots of companies might be trying to do that at the moment and figuring out how they're going to identify what they want to focus on, what's going to speak to their potential hires, what's going to accurately represent what they do, not just aspirationally, but as an accurate representation. Jennifer, I'm curious to know from you, CSR can involve any number of things. It can involve community involvement in terms of volunteer programs, philanthropy. It can be your environmental strategy. It can be any number of things. Can you recommend ways for employers to find what's going to speak to their their talent pool?
Yeah, sure. So at Iron Mountain, I think there's two big things. So one is that we focused on our values, and we really have our employees look to our values when they make decisions, and kind of how we operate and how we communicate, and we embed them into, all of our moments that matter and our employee journey. So as we do that, then that comes into things like you've just described. So for example, we have Moving Mountains. And so that's a program where employees get a certain number of hours per year to leverage for giving back to the community. And so we help them do that. And then the other thing we do is we have a foundation. So, we protect and store things that are most precious to people. So, we also do philanthropic and we give back to the community by helping protect some of those things. So whether it's the Lincoln Papers, or whether it's, recording an interview with somebody who may not be here in the future, and kind of preserving those types of things. So again, we kind of link our brand and what we do to our values, and then kind of bring that to our employee population.
Megan, how have you thought about picking that most valuable thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we talk about environmental sustainability, you said the stat in the beginning, like it is now becoming kind of table stakes. But, how do you get above all of the noise? How do you talk about all of these things? And I think it's just always, all the time, in as many formats as you can. I mean, we have a pretty robust sustainability program. We've committed to setting our science-based target. We have carbon neutrality in these areas. We've done these big things. And it is amazing to me that even within our employee base, even though we're loud and proud and talk about it all of these places, that I'll meet employees that didn't even know we had a sustainability program. And these are employees that are within Zendesk. And so really the challenge is like, again, that consistent message, but, in employee testimonials and having employees share with their network, and videos and social and blog posts and press releases, and then resurfacing all of that in 3 months, but really just that consistent drumbeat and having that information kind of everywhere in the job postings and the website. It's hard to like overestimate how much you need to kind of get that message out across the board to have it really land and resonate with folks.
Laura, when you were getting your CSR program started, did you do any kind of competitive research to find out? I would love to know more about that.
Yeah, our agency, I mean, so much of the work that we did to kind of get to our strategy involved just assessments of all kinds. So an internal assessment, organizational and leadership kind of alignment assessment, peer benchmarking, an assessment of their activities and focus areas, and then overall just a general landscape assessment of trends within corporate social responsibility and the ESG landscape. And so we had a pretty good idea, at least from publicly available data, what our primary competitors were doing in kind of all three of the ESG pillars. What are they doing in terms of their environmental and sustainability commitments? Where are they active in their communities, and what's their social story? And then, less sort of scintillating, but equally important is sort of what's their governance and compliance. So we had a pretty good idea, I'd say a very good idea of where our competitors are focusing on, but that's a snapshot in time, and this is a really fast moving landscape. So we've got to continue each time we're getting into publishing or the preparation for our responsibility report. We sort of have to take a look at that competitive assessment all over again to make sure we're continuing to lead in the places we want to lead, and knowing that we can't lead everywhere in all of those areas. Where are we continuing to be willing to just be at parity? So
I wonder, to what extent do you, and does any employer have to fight the urge to just simply want to match what other companies are doing rather than what you guys were talking about earlier, doing what you're already good at? You can't accomplish everything as an employer, and your ESG strategy or your CSR, what, you know, all these, we could talk in acronyms for the rest of this conversation. It's not going to look the same as even your competitor in the same industry. So to what extent do you have to fight the urge just to match and say, oh, we do that too, Judith?
I wanted to just add something because that is so important. You know, there are so many different pieces from recycling and things that you could do, right, from the diversity perspective and other components that you need. We wanted to make sure that we had not only that we focus on the areas that we thought that were important, but also that our employees were passionate about. So going back to the event that we had last week, what we did was a workshop where we put like, these are 10 different initiatives related to our ESG efforts and environmental, social, and governance. And what we did was put every single one of the tables with every single one of those efforts to discuss them and almost pitch them to our executive team, almost like a Shark Tank, where we wanted to decide, okay, are these the areas where we want to focus on? Because these were 100 of our most influential people in the business, and not influential from the leadership or title perspective, real influential across organizations. We had employees from all over the world, from Africa, Latin America, Europe, and just being able to see what was their perspective as well, because sometimes what we understand as important, it may not necessarily be the case in certain geographies and things like that. So it was really instrumental for us to get that value as we define, okay, what are the areas we're going to be focusing in the rest of the year and going into 2024. So we really use the kind of like the wisdom of our people in that exercise to help us prioritize what is it that we're going to do. And some things may be very low hanging fruit. That's like, let's just make it happen. And others, we need to say, well, maybe that's not something we're going to tackle this year. So that was an approach that we took that I think it was very, very educational for a lot of us as well.
Jennifer, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I was just going to say, I think it has to be authentic. So, I mean, I think, you know, one of the biggest things that we have focused on, we're about to launch kind of our purpose and some new branding. So I can't get into all the details, but really is kind of having the customer and the employee experience aligned. And so, you know, many of the other panelists talked about how they've made great strides in ESG, and we've done that. And we have internal foundations and external foundations, and helping people understand how those all connect together to kind of who we are and what we are for our customers and for, you know, ourselves, particularly as a company that creates no product, we sell services. You know, our employees create that customer experience. So I think, you know, many people on the panel have talked about connecting those threads and communicating and helping people understand how it all really comes together. And one of the other things that we've done is we have really focused on the employee journey and kind of contextualizing that and putting a visual around that and helping people understand what does that look like and what does it feel like at each stage. Including kind of, you know, wishing somebody farewell, because our hope is that potentially they come back, right? You know, as we live in a world where, you know, people are moving around much more frequently and you know, the labor market is tight, you know, we're saying goodbye for now, but, you know, we hope they come back. So that's been a big focus for us too.
Creating the visuals of an employee journey. I've actually started to see that on some employers' career pages, where they'll essentially make a case study. This is our, I don't know, VP of engineering. He started here. One I saw that was very detailed, actually talked about some of the projects that he worked on along the way where he worked up to his position. And I thought that was so effective because he actually didn't start as an engineer. He started in a different department. And so it really helps someone picture themselves contributing, which I'd like to talk about that actually. So employees want an employer with a greater purpose, but that doesn't mean a lot unless they feel like they can contribute to it on an individual level. So how, Jason, at Eightfold, how do you help employees see the greater effect of their work?
So I think that's a big part of how our product is designed, but I want to go back and double click on something you said, Emily, when you were talking about the example you saw on someone's career page. You talked about the journey and this person's path to this executive role, but the words you used was projects, not necessarily jobs. And I think one of the things that's an opportunity for a lot of these efforts around CSRs and ESGs is employees can gain a ton of experience and a ton of skills and a ton of opportunity through whether it's volunteering, community efforts, employee resource groups. And sometimes all of that learning and all of that development isn't always easy to track or obtain or quantify. So I like your example and your use of the specific word projects, because that's actually one of the things that our technology is designed to do. But I think more broadly, I think that's just the new way of work in the world we live in, right? We talk about how in the past, if you were recruiting, I've grown up in a recruiting career, you always want to try to emphasize how someone's work touches the customer or the product in some way. And I think now you even take that further to say, how are you impacting the community or impacting, society in some way? And I think, through being able to not only tell these stories or highlight these opportunities, but also get your hands around this data to actually be able to storytell and quantify what comes out of this, we get better at that storytelling. We get better at championing employees as ambassadors and turning them into recruiters. And one of the things I've always said is if you're explaining what you do for a living to someone else and you start talking about, purpose more than just a paycheck, and you really show the passion that you have, people start to get goosebumps. And if you make people feel goosebumps, you're winning, right? When you're trying to recruit and engage talent. So,
Judith, because you lead talent acquisition, I'd like to know how you can introduce that idea of individual contribution to someone very early in the recruiting process.
Yes. So, so like I mentioned before, right, sometimes our employees don't always understand, okay, exactly what's the scope of what we do at TTEC. And we like to think of TTEC as talent and technology together. And but the talent piece is really instrumental to everything we do. We also don't serve necessarily just products. We have a lot of services that are delivered by our talent. So for us, what we have done very early in the recruitment process is making sure that we're telling stories, and we're also having realistic job previews that shows employees terms of like what a day in a life looks like and how the impact that they can have in someone's life. We interact with millions of customers on an ongoing basis. So they have an opportunity to touch the life of someone that's going through a difficult time with their mortgage, with their healthcare, with their service provider, whether it's, a credit card, any type of service. So for us to be able to make sure that we can make that connection between what the employee is going to be doing and how it's going to impact the lives of different customers is very important. And also we have people that are part of organization that have been for a while that tell that story very early in the onboarding process. Our purpose is to deliver humanity to business. So we also try to integrate very personalized human aspects in the recruitment cycle. We hire over 1,000 people every single week. So when you do it at a scale, it's very easy to desensitize the process. So for us, it's important to make sure that they stay connected. So using some of the technology that is available to understand who you are as an individual, what's important to you. So we have a little avatar that is called Louis. And Louis helps us to kind of like guide them in the recruitment process. He personalized, like, I go by Judith, that's not my first name, that's my middle name, right? But it's like, what's your preferred nickname? Like, what are you passionate about? What's your pet? What's your favorite team? And things like that, that it really allows us to show people that it's like, we are serious about our purpose, not only when it comes to our clients and our customers, but also in the experience we're trying to deliver to our employees. So doing things like that very early on and make sure that that experience is consistent We have put together a full training for anybody that touches the early employee life cycle, from the sourcing perspective to talent acquisition or onboarding guide team or training team. So there's that consistency across the board. So as with anything, right, there's still of opportunities still out there, but we feel very good about kind of like the journey that we took to bring that to life.
Megan, your title is not talent acquisition. You know, you're not leading the recruiting efforts, but as Judith just mentioned, she is working with people, you know, who are doing the training, communicating this information in the recruiting process takes a lot of different people. I like to know how you work with recruiting, talent acquisition, and even some, you know, maybe even early screening folks to communicate employer purpose to potential hires. What's your role? What's that collaboration like?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's a supporting role. So kind of providing any materials that I can for our talent teams to have those conversations with, you know, prospects and folks that are interested in the company, making sure that, you know, our impact and sustainability information is on the job descriptions, is easily accessible for folks who are interested in Zendesk, you know, really, you know, on or about us and all of these different places. And then on occasion, you know, when there is, a prospective employee that's really interested in how we are doing our impact work and really wants to, you know, have this idea of authenticity validated, then I'll join those conversations to kind of, you know, really say, like, we're not just putting this out here, like, we really believe in these things. It's really ingrained in our culture, and kind of help them understand where we're at in our journey.
I'd like to know from you all now that, I mean, you're here because now you all have a greater awareness of how your employer brand feels, looks, sounds in the labor market. How has this increased awareness changed the way you do, I guess, the smaller bits, not the strategy bits, but kind of what is affected by the strategy? So things like job descriptions, the way your careers page looks, feels, and sounds, the way you use social media for recruitment marketing. How does it show up in little ways like that? I'd like to know maybe changes that you've made recently, things that you stopped doing or started doing. We'll start with Jennifer here, and then I'd like to hear from Laura, since you just did this. I know.
Yeah, there's a couple things that come to mind. So in certain segments of our business, we spotlight employees. So if you're out on LinkedIn or what have you, you'll see a spotlight on employees. And it is a combination of personally who they are and what they do for the organization and how they show up. So kind of that personalized experience. And then, you know, we also, like I said, we've built a lot into the employee journey. Kind of all those moments that matter. But one thing that I really think about is, you know, building in recognition and those types of things as well. So kind of building kind of the values. We have videos. I think Judith had mentioned videos. So, you know, building our values into kind of who we are as Mountaineers. What does that look like? Who are the people who work here? What do they do? Maybe it's highlighting, you know, during the pandemic, there was things tied to that, or now more recently, some of the efforts around supporting our Ukrainian employees, or different things like that, that we kind of, it humanizes things and kind of also brings forward what we do for a living. And then our, you know, our ESG. So we have a pretty, you know, forward-leaning ESG strategy too.
Certainly illustrative of what you said before, and that you're not producing a product, your people are creating that experience. And so
yes,
what you have to put forward are those people, right? Because if that's what people are getting experience when they come in the door.
Exactly.
Laura, what about you?
Yeah, we had worked on restating and kind of revamping our employer value proposition just prior to the pandemic. And as we all know, and as you sort of said at the top of our session, that employee, both current and prospective employee expectations of companies have changed, and what they're prioritizing, what they're looking for, and just a big shift away. Not that salary and benefits and all of that, and career growth isn't vitally important, but we have found that particularly as, you know, the Gen Z population increasingly comes into the workforce, that company meeting and positive social impact are really important. So as we you know, kind of came out of the pandemic, we had to go back to the work that we had done with the employer value proposition, and not necessarily wholesale scrap it, but how are we going to use our values that are kind of underpinned our EVP? How are we going to articulate those in ways that start to highlight more, you know, our company meaning and purpose, and bring that out, like some of the other panelists have said, either through content, through imagery, through graphics on our career site, and then also making sure that for associates we're and prospective and current, that there's a easy access and familiarity with our responsibility report, which really dives into you know, all of the work that we're doing in those areas pretty deeply.
You mentioned young folks being particularly valuing this type of work.
Not to overgeneralize too, because I mean, I think that there's,
sure, right.
It's just you can't ignore that there are, you know, generational shifts in preferences and priorities that are changing the workplace.
Yes. Oh, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I think most people, I mean, the 96% of employees globally that the stat from, I think it was Mercer. I mean, that's not just Gen Z.
Yeah.
That's everybody expecting an environmental impact or sustainability, excuse me. Something that workers can smell a mile away is a lie.
Yeah.
and just misrepresentation of what a company is good at, and that's going to be a huge turnoff. So how can companies talk about what they're good at and the impact that they're making without looking too self-promotional, right? If it feels too difficult, you're supposed to self-promote, but not too much. How do you balance promoting your good work and then simply getting on with it? Jason, what do you think about this? How do you strike this balance?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think some of it was mentioned earlier. I think it's not as effective to just highlight initiatives or partnerships or programming. It's speaking in outcomes and also modeling behaviors. And I think if you're thinking more around the outcome and the impact more than just the awareness or the marketing, you know, that's not promotional. It's facts, it's numbers, that's, you know, the results of what you've been able to accomplish. But also, I think as a result of that, it gives you an opportunity to either highlight or to maybe enable people to model some of those behaviors. So why do we do this? Or why is this important to us? Or how does this display or explain our company values? And here's how this extends out through all of these initiatives and partnerships and all these other things. I think it really becomes more of speaking in outcomes and behaviors more than just logos and labels.
You mentioned modeling. I'm curious to know at CarMax, since this is newer to your organization, have you seen a change in the way your employees behave? Do you see the company values manifested more strongly? Do you think this has had an effect on your current workforce?
I certainly think that it's you know, it's given our workforce something to sink their teeth into, you know, where we have our overall CSR narrative, but then we have all of the disclosures that come along with that really back up that narrative with facts. But we also, our associates have really enjoyed having a voice in where our foundation and our philanthropy is targeted. And so we've long really enjoyed that engagement from our associates through our the way that we approach team builders and the way that we approach associate choice and directing funds, both in our CarMax Cares Month and in on Giving Tuesday. So we have a lot of engagement in aspects of our CSR that have already, we kind of step into this broader effort around CSR and ESG with a bit of credibility already built in with our associate base, because they've seen us as an organization act and behave in that manner, where their voice really matters, and that goes a long way.
Yeah. We don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to get to one more question, which very much has to do with the insincerity or sincerity of being able to talk about your company purpose. Is when you have potential hires coming to you, asking you about, I don't know, CarMax's philanthropy practice is well developed. Let's say someone else's isn't. If they say, hey, I care about philanthropy, what do you do about this? Or I care about community investment in STEM programs, what do you do about this? Megan, how do you prepare your talent acquisition team to address what you don't do?
Yeah, great question. I mean, this is, I don't think that we've seen a ton of this on the talent acquisition side, but we hear this from our employees of like, you know, I really care about X thing, you know, why aren't we doing anything about that? And I think it goes back to having that really clear, you know, laser focus on what you're really good at, you know, and doing that really well. And just being really transparent. Like, we can't do everything. We can't boil the ocean, but we know that we can uniquely show up in a really powerful way and make a tangible impact in this direction. And so this is what we focus on. And then really just, you know, kind of guiding the conversation back to where we can uniquely show up.
Well, I want to thank all of you so much. This has been really valuable. Jason, Jennifer, Laura, Megan, and Judith. You've been so generous with your time and with your expertise. So thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it back over to Steve with From Day One.